we don't live healthy. We sit too much, we eat the wrong things, we do not exercise enough, and in addition, some of us engage sometimes in unhealthy habits which put our health in additional risk. Some people smoke because they think this is freedom. Some people intentionally inject or scratch heavy metals or other chemicals into their skin because they want to have a sexy or fancy looking tattoo. At the same time, the number of people who get cancer in a younger age is continuously increasing. So, should we be concerned? Hi, I'm Manfred Stapff, your host of the Real-World Evidence Perspective, which brings you truth, data, and candid context. In this episode, we will look a little bit closer at data and evidence about some lifestyle behaviors, specifically marijuana smoking and tattoos. Some people think marijuana smoking is less dangerous than smoking cigarettes. We will look at the data whether this is true, especially they think if they don't inhale, it cannot really matter. In terms of the tattoos, we intentionally injecting heavy metals, other toxic compounds into our skin, and they stay there forever, perhaps for their whole life, and can make their damage, their cancer-creating activity for the rest of your life. So remember, in order to make a decision to have a robust opinion, we have to look at the facts, we have to look at the data. It's not enough if we have alone a hypothesis, a good reason. This reason has to be proven in scientific experiments, and then the results of the scientific experiments have to be tested in the real world, and then we have enough evidence and enough knowledge and data to build our own opinion, to build our own decision. The terminology marijuana and cannabis are often used in the same way for the same thing. Just to be correct, marijuana contains more THC, which is responsible for the psychological effects and for the dependency. For our smoking topic now, it's less of an importance because the danger comes from the smoking, from the burning, from the combustion, from the smoke itself. If we inhale it, the smoke gets obviously into the lung and can create cancer there. If we don't inhale it, does not mean that it is less dangerous. Then you may get your cancer in your mouth and you will get oral cancer if you get cancer. So let's look at the data, how likely it is, how big the risk is. A California study looked at 45,000 patients and found a threefold increase in the risk of developing oral cancer in people who smoked marijuana. They called it cannabis use because cannabis use is an ICD code and can be easily found in the electronic medical records. To be exact, the 5-year risk in cannabis users was 0.74%, and in people who did not smoke marijuana, it was 0.23%. So these numbers look quite low. And whenever the risks, the absolute numbers are very, very low, it's a little bit misleading whether we call about a relative risk increase or whether we talk about the absolute numbers. And therefore, if the absolute risk is so low, there is a better number which is called the number needed to treat, or in this case, since it's a bad effect, the number needed to harm. And it is calculated by dividing the number 1 by the difference between the absolute risks. Here we come to a number of 196. So the number needed to harm is 196. This means that only one person in 196 persons gets oral cancer because of the cannabis use. So it's 1 of 196. I leave it to you to interpret the number. We will talk about it later. But this number gives perhaps a little bit more transparency than these percentages and the interpretation that is a threefold increased risk. So now let's look at the tattoos. Should we be concerned about the tattoos? Tattoos are a matter of fashion. Tattoos are a trend. They help to express yourself. They even give you self-confidence. So it's more an emotional thing than something where we can apply facts and numbers and data. But let's look at it. There are about 20,000 tattoo parlors in the United States. And if we assume that each one has 10 to 2,000 customers, we can calculate that about 30 million new tattoos are made every year. 30 million times heavy metals, toxic chemicals are scratched or are injected into the skin and stay there forever. It's important to notice that the FDA regulates tattoo inks as a part of the Cosmetic Act. But the FDA does not test the inks, the chemicals, and does not have to approve them. The FDA only reacts more or less passively when they hear about problems with some specific components or some specific inks. The most commonly used tattoo inks are black and red and blue, and you see on the list here that these are some interesting chemicals, and it can also contain several other compounds, heavy metals and other unorganic or organic molecules. The red color sometimes may cause allergic reactions. The blue color sometimes creates skin irritations, and all these acute reactions which easily can be diagnosed and often very easily be treated. So it is not a real big problem for acute reaction. But what about the chronic? What about the reaction over the lifetime, since the tattoos stay in the skin forever? So skin cancer has been reported in tattoos, mainly basal cell carcinoma. But it's not clear whether this is a rare coincidence or whether there is really a causality. There are no really good studies, convincing data to prove that tattoos actually cause the skin cancer. Tattoo ink will wander, or can at least wander, from the tattoo location to the regional lymph nodes and stay there forever, and create cancer there in the lymph nodes. So a cancer of lymph nodes is a lymphoma. It's a severe blood cancer. There is a study, a Swedish study published last year, who looked at a registry of 11,000 patients from a national registry. And they found that people with tattoos have a 21% higher risk of developing lymphoma. In absolute numbers, this was 2% without tattoo and 2.4% with tattoos. Of course, tattoos can be just one single one and can be larger, can be the whole arm, can be just a little symbol. So they did not consider the size of the tattoo. But they found anyway, without looking at the size and the area and the colors, found a difference. And the 21% difference sounds quite impressive, sounds quite really higher risk. Again, here the absolute numbers, 2 and 2.4%, are quite small. So again, we have to look at the NNT, number needed to treat, or again in this case, number needed to harm. If we calculate this, 1 divided by the difference, 1 divided by 0.4%, is 250. So a similar number, among 250 persons, 1 person got a lymphoma because of their tattoo. So for an individual person, it does not look as a very, very big high risk to be terribly afraid of. But a tattoo parlor let's say with 1,000 customers, should be aware that among these 1,000 customers, perhaps 4 people will develop a lymphoma because of that tattoo. Number needed to treat are often used, and I have another episode about that, a little bit more statistical one. Number needed to treat help a lot to evaluate a little bit better with something which we can imagine in a more natural way. What is absolute risk, what is relative risk. To give you examples, in cardiovascular disease, statin lipid-lowering therapy, one thinks it makes sense and it is clinically relevant if a number needed to treat to avoid heart attack or to prevent smoke is in the area of 10 to 30 or in this range. If you have been sent to war, the number needed to harm and the likelihood to get injured or even killed in the Ukrainian war is in the area of 3 or so. 1 in 3 soldiers, unfortunately, get injured or get killed. Similar number as it was in World War II. Difference is tattoos and smoking is your decision. You are not forced to smoke. You are not forced to have a tattoo. Soldiers sometimes are forced. So this gives you an area, an idea how to interpret the number needed to harm or number needed to treat. So with marijuana smoking, 1 in 190 for oral cancer. For tattoos, 1 in 250 for lymphoma, a blood cancer. It's now your decision, making your risk-benefit profile based on these numbers, whether you engage in this kind of lifestyle behavior or whether you stop it. You can stop smoking, and if you stop smoking, one says that at least the cardiovascular risk, heart attack, goes back to normal 10 years after you stop smoking. In the case of tattoo, the ink stays in the body, stays in the skin. Even if you remove the tattoo with laser methods, it can stay in the lymph nodes and create lymphoma forever, for the rest of your life. So it's your decision, your risk-benefit evaluation, whether you think it's worth it, the self-confidence, the feeling of freedom, the self-expression, or the risk of developing cancer. And in order to make this decision, you needed to look at these data, at the facts, at the studies. In my newest book, Real-World Evidence Unveiled, Navigating the Maze of Modern Misinformation, I have put together a lot of information, how to look at facts, how to interpret studies, how to look at pitfalls in statistics, and how to apply such methods to decisions in daily life, and how to identify fake news, differentiate misinformation, disinformation from actual facts. This book is available on Amazon as ebook, paperback, and hardcover. So I hope this overview about data and clinical studies about 2 lifestyle behaviors and their risks have helped you a little bit, and you come closer to facts and how to base your own opinion and make your own decision based on real-world experience. Thank you for watching the Real-World Evidence Perspective, which gives you truth, data, and candid context. Please don't forget to like, forward, comment, or subscribe, whatever you find reasonable. Thank you very much.